We have the experience of working with 6+ E-2 candidates at this point. We know really well what it goes into making sure that they can secure their E-2 visa. And we really hold the hand, in the beginning, whether it's filling out questionnaires for our candidates or whatever really it takes to make sure that, the transition for them to come to this country, securing the visa, and then more importantly, opening up their business. Because I truly understand, right? It's a big decision to leave your entire life in another country, come here and embark on this journey.
You have Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Visa Franchise. Excited to have on Radhik Patel, who's the co-CEO of Options for Senior America, a franchise option in the home care space. Radhik, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on your podcast here.
You kind of embody the American dream, as so many people are moving to the US, not necessarily for themselves, but the next generation and building upon, the next generation. So I'd love if you could share with the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of a bit about your family background to kick off today's episode.
Absolutely. So yeah, I am, a first generation immigrant, like a lot of individuals, whose parents are in business, right? So for me, business started at a very young age. My folks immigrated to this country and they decided to, pursue the American dream by buying a small business and operating it. It was actually their first business was a franchise as well. They were operating the business and they were able to scale their businesses from one to another. Primarily kind of throughout their career, they were in the retail space, a lot of owner operator businesses. And, education was a top priority for them, for us, for my sister and I growing up. So I was fortunate enough to go to a private school growing up. And from there, I attended the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied finance. Kind of growing up in a business household, I knew it was something that I always wanted to do. But I kind of wanted to mesh that with my educational background and the opportunities that I had growing up, taking a little more of an institutional approach. For me, right out of college, I took up a very typical kind of Wharton-like job, which was working in private equity.
In New York?
I was not in New York. I was actually in Florida, first in Palm Beach Gardens, and then I was in Miami. So maybe the New York, So I had a chance to work at a real estate private equity firm initially, and I wanted to do something a little more impactful. My mom being in the healthcare space, I wanted to transition to healthcare private equity, which is exactly what I did. And so, from there, I again knew I wanted to be a business owner and be an entrepreneur. So I launched a search fund, which is, just a fancy way of saying setting out on a journey to buy a business and operate it. So I ended up, looking for a business. I spent about 2 years, looking at a lot of different types of businesses, just like E-2 candidates would do. I looked at everything you can imagine from, med spas to medical billing companies to different home care companies. And ultimately I ended up, deciding to acquire Options for Senior America, because not only was it in kind of the healthcare space where we were providing care for seniors, something, that I felt really good about waking up every day. But more importantly, it's a franchisor. So it would allow me to achieve my goals, at scale. And so I knew it was the perfect fit for me since my folks were small business owners. They were kind of on the franchisee side. So I had always seen, sometimes the struggles, but also the great rewards of being a franchisee. And I felt very passionate about, leading a company where we had franchisees who were underneath us and, help them guide them to achieve the American dream. So yeah, that's a little bit about, my background and how I kind of landed on Options for Senior America.
And obviously we're going to dive more into Options for Senior America, but you brought up a pretty interesting point that just today I was talking to a prospective client that wanted to buy his own independent business instead of going the franchise route. And I basically said, it's possible there are business brokers, but it's going to take a long time to source that business, do the due diligence. And the fact that it took you 2 years, it's not a matter, opening up a new options for Senior America with Visa franchise for 6 months. It could take 6 to 24 months plus if you're looking and you're set on just buying an existing independent business. Obviously, there are some franchise resales available and we always look at that. But if you're just set on existing, be aware if you're looking to get the E-2 visa, it could be a long road ahead.
Absolutely, Patrick. I couldn't agree with you more there. 2 years was certainly, there were a lot of ups and downs. As you mentioned, right? Whenever you're looking at buying an existing business, whether it's a franchise resale or an independent business, right? There's an immense amount of due diligence that goes into, every deal. Aside from due diligence, there's a lot more that you're paying for the goodwill of the business, and you're oftentimes taking on leverage, right? And so you need to be very thorough in your approach. And just from firsthand experience, right? I probably put in a letter of intent for over 30 different businesses, several of which went all the way, during kind of the last minute asset purchase agreement stages, which ultimately fell through, right? And so there's not only, a lot of time, but there's a lot of resources, whether, that's money and you're incurring debt deal fees. There's legal, accounting, quality of earnings that you may get done. And so exactly what you said, that even if it's a franchise resale, you have to kind of do all of this in order to make sure that it works out versus, starting something from scratch, right? And becoming an options franchisee, and the time period's a lot lower, your upfront investment is a lot lower, and you still have the same amount of upside, right? So there's a lot of benefits to, going down the franchise route.
Because the multiples are pretty high in terms of someone wanting to buy an existing home care business. I mean, we see if the owner is making for their family, 200K, it could sell for 600K, maybe more. Where opening one of these businesses would be closer to 100K to get it off the ground.
Absolutely, yeah, you're spot on about that, and right, and as kind of the deal size becomes bigger, right, on a resale, I think it's really important to remember that a lot of times the only sort of debt that you have available is the Small Business Administration, right, the 7A loans, and all of those different types of debt programs require personal guarantees and things like that, where the risk can be higher, right? And so versus being a brand new franchise owner, all in our costs can be anywhere between 85 to $110,000, and you once you make that investment, you have no debt to worry about. It's just really about performing and operating your business. You don't have to worry about all this debt that you have over your head, right?
And for those coming overseas, it's tough because they're not eligible for the SBA loan program until after they've worked at the business, 1 year or get the green card. So it's almost kind of like predatory lenders where there are loans available for the small businesses, but at extremely high rates. So we always advocate, hey, start small, start with a franchise, especially if you aren't already doing that business and not bringing, a business that you're already conducting business in the US with. And for you guys, one thing I'd like to talk about is just what I appreciate is the level of transparency that you have, where I think you might be the only home care franchise that doesn't just do year by year performance, but month by month revenue performance. Could you dive in a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Transparency and integrity are probably our top two values, right, as a
Yeah.
franchisor. And so this can really be seen through the franchise disclosure document. And as you mentioned in item 19, not only do we list out what, how our average franchise performs, people who've been with us for over 3 years, but we also list out the revenues, right? The average revenues for a franchisee that's been with us for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and almost on a month to month basis, right? So people have a very transparent idea of how our franchisees perform. And, further, we actually, we really tell our candidates, right, who come to us wanting to become an options franchisee, that please feel free to ask, those types of questions during your validation calls, right? We want you to know exactly what you're getting yourself into, because quite frankly, Patrick, we're pretty proud of, the numbers that we produce, and, how we help our franchisees get there, So yeah, transparency is everything to us.
And it seems like you're unique business model has some competitive advantages as well as even advantages for the bottom line in terms of operating at a higher profit margin. Could you tell us a little bit about this live-in model that you guys have really revolutionized in the home care space?
Yeah, absolutely. First, for our audience who may not know, Options for Senior America, was founded in 1989, right? And it was founded by two brothers who were actually looking for live-in services for their mother, right?
Two
And
other immigrants from
yes, two
Lebanon.
other immigrants, precisely. And, they were looking for live in services, which is, other words for 24/7 care, right? Even though, the industry is a lot bigger than it was 35 years ago, interestingly enough, only about 12% of agencies provide around the clock 24/7 live in care the way that we do it, right? And so, what this means is, care providers, are living at the care recipient's house. They're there for 24/7, right? And the reason why that program has translated to higher profitability for us is because of a simple kind of business model innovation, which is that we charge our live-in rates on a daily rate, right? Versus most agencies who may not necessarily have the care providers to be able to do it on a daily rate. And, they may have to, staff two 12-hour shifts, right? And so this has resulted in us, having higher margins. But more importantly than that, our average live-in case has a case value of over $50,000, right? And the duration of that is 6 months. So it's more in terms of recurring revenue. The case value is 50,000, over 50,000 compared to, $20,000 for a hourly case, right? So it's almost two and a half times. And in addition to that, you're still operating at a 30% margin on a case by case basis, right? And so these cases tend to be very profitable. And, really, they also are less maintenance as well, right? Because once you have a good match between the care provider and the care recipient, they're longer in nature. And typically you get less our franchisees get less calls and they're less maintenance altogether. So it's really been a main focus for us. And more than 60% of our revenues today in our corporate territories actually come from our live in program.
Radhik, how do you help franchisees? Because it's almost like a two-sided marketplace. Get the seniors or people that need services from caregivers, and then also recruit and help the franchisees train caregivers.
Absolutely. So first, in terms of prospective franchisees who may be interested in options, right? I think it's important to understand kind of like how as a franchisor do we help our franchisees, get these types of cases, right? And so we do a few things. One is we have a partnership with A Place for Mom, which is the largest lead generation company, which extends to all of our franchisees. So, this is a great way for you to get a lot of inquiries for potential, cases without really any risk, right? Because we're on a, rev share model with A Place for Mom. Second, what we do is we've actually developed landing pages specifically for our live-in services. So we do this, and as part of our marketing fee, we also set this up for all of our franchisees. And we really believe these are really important because we want to drive traffic in your respective territory. Anytime someone searches up for live-in care or around-the-clock respite care, right, on the internet, just by geofencing, we want to make sure that we have the Google AdWords set up and we're the first
SEO is
option
very
that
yeah.
comes up because these are high value leads, right?
Oh yeah.
They're certainly
And you're
very
saying
very well worth it.
this could result in 50K of revenue. Did I understand that correctly?
Exactly. It's $50,000 in average revenue for, one of these leads. So, if you're operating at a 30% margin, that's almost $15,000 in profit, right? Just from one of these cases. And that's based on our historical data over the last 3 years. Yeah, they're really high value. So we set these, landing pages up as part of our marketing fee. So that's a little bit about, a couple of things that we help out our franchisees to, acquire these leads. We also have a 7-step marketing program where we teach our franchisees during our 1 week training, how to go to hospitals, rehabilitation centers, assisted living facilities to be able to market yourself and do business development to also obtain these leads, right? But, to take it one step further,
There's nothing
go
like the
ahead.
owner doing that. And that's the beauty of the
Exactly,
franchise
exactly.
system.
Absolutely, right? So yeah, that's kind of, we will train you A to Z. We've been doing this. We're operational for over 35 years. So, we're able to train them exactly on how to approach, these different health systems to be able to obtain these leads. It requires a lot of persistence and being tenacious, but it's certainly doable. Our franchisees, show us that every day. In terms of the care providers, right? Hiring care providers, we have 22 different ways that we, show during our 1 week training on how, we can help our franchisees hire care providers, right? And we do, a lot of the normal kind of typical things that people in the industry do, which is Indeed job posts. There's a lot of different websites just to hire CNAs.
What's a CNA?
A CNA is a certified nursing assistant. So, to backtrack a little bit, most of the times, depending on state requirements, in order for you to staff a personal care or a companionship case, you're required to hire a care provider or, a caregiver who is a certified nursing assistant, right? So for us, making sure that our care providers are certified and that they're actually, they have the experience and they're also, trained, is really important, right? We don't want to just hire anyone for a case. The quality of care and the standard of care are really important to us at Options. So we do, a few things there. And to add on to that, we also have partnerships with certified nursing assistant schools. So every year there may be several schools in your, in your territory, some community colleges too, that have, a program where they have 30 to 40 CNAs graduating every year. And so you want to make sure that, you build the relationships with these schools so you have a great kind of program of an influx of care providers in your area, right? And so we teach our franchisees on how to approach these schools, how to structure partnerships with these schools, and how to retain those caregivers as well. As we're in the process of building, what we like to say, career pathways in order for them to, not only obtain maybe a CNA certification, but work for us and view our employment as a stepping stone to maybe becoming a nurse one day, right? We're very big on immigrants. And so, my folks did the same thing, right? They came to this country with barely any money. They worked hard, they became a business owner, and now they have the great fortune of employing others, right? And so I view employment in the same way where, you have individuals coming from other countries who may want to be a CNA or a certified nursing assistant as their first job. Well, how can we at Options help them secure that certification to become a CNA? And ultimately, we recognize that, these types of jobs are typically just a stepping stone for them to maybe become a nurse or, a healthcare administrator. And right. And so we want to enable them for this, career progression rather than, just try to hire people to be CNAs for our company, right? We've recognized that, there's limitations with that approach.
And Radhik, year 5, what does a successful franchisee look like in terms of how many CNAs, caregivers, how many people at the home office that they're employing?
Absolutely. So we like to typically think of things, in a 3-year window, right? We recognize that the first 2 years are typically ramp up period. So by the third year, right, our average franchise typically does, close to $1 million in revenue. And what that means is you typically have, 15 to 20 caregivers on your roster, probably about 12 to 13 current, actively in the field providing care. And, this is, as I said, 50% of the revenues ideally are coming from your live-in cases and 50% of your revenues are coming from hourly cases, right? In terms of, your kind of corporate office, Your office would likely have you as the franchise owner working full time, and then you would have one or two other employees. So you would have maybe one full time care coordinator, and you may have someone helping you with the marketing, right? If you're the business owner. And so one of the things I always like to tell, prospective candidates who are looking at options, our model is very interesting because the way we have it set up is there's basically three buckets that I look at, right, in order to, ensure success as a franchise owner, right? And the three bases that you kind of have to cover, the first is, you have to have a really good care coordinator, right? Whether that's you doing it yourself or you hiring someone, care coordination is a very critical part of ensuring success. And then the other equally, if not maybe more important, is marketing and business development, right? So those are probably the two most important positions in running a successful, branch. And the last is, just basic admin work, right? And so I always tell our franchise owners that, we all are human beings. We all have strengths, right? And you should lean into what your strength is, right? So if you're the empathetic, compassionate, you love, talking about care and making sure your quality of care is great. Well, maybe being the care coordinator is awesome. And then I recommend you hiring someone, for the marketing and business development. Or if you're, really, you love talking to people and, you love networking and you love getting to know, people that work at hospitals and you're really tenacious and you're persistent where, you love just putting yourself out there. Well, then business development and marketing would be very good for your skill set, right? And so then maybe you can think about hiring a care coordinator. So at the minimum, we recommend that at least one of the franchise owners is involved in the day to day of the operations in whatever role they deem is best suited for their background. And then beyond that, you typically have maybe one and a half other hires that you would have at your office, and the rest of your caregivers would be out in the field providing the actual care.
Do you have any husband-wife combos where one handles more marketing and sales and the other one's more on the operations and caregiving side?
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, in fact, Patrick, there's a lot of E-2 candidates that we deal with, and the E-2 program is wonderful because it typically involves, the whole family coming here to the United States to embark on this entrepreneurial journey. And so we get a lot of great candidates who are a husband and a wife, and a lot of the times, it's not always the case, but a lot of the times, the wife typically likes, doing the care coordination and the husband loves doing the marketing, the business development. And, this is a great setup because it allows you to operate very lean.
Lean.
It allows you to keep your costs down because, for at least the first couple of years up until you're at a point where you need to make additional hires, you're able to keep it within the family, right? And that's what, the American dream is
That's
about,
what
right?
you
Working with
guys
your
did, right?
family.
What I mean,
Exactly.
you started working quite young, and I'm sure your sister too in the family business.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's a great business model that is our brand and home care space in general for immigrants looking to come here. Just because oftentimes in other countries caregiving is very maternal in nature, and typically a lot of our franchise owners who are coming here as E-2 candidates, they make wonderful care coordinators, right? And a lot of times, they often have either, it's either the husband or the wife who then also loves doing the marketing and business development. So, yeah, it's definitely, when you have a two-person team, it's even better. But it's not a requirement, right? Even if it's just one individual looking to open an options franchise, we're certainly encouraging and all for it.
Yeah, and what I love about it just checks a lot of marks where relatively low investment amount, as low as you said, 80, 100, 110K. High earning potential though. It's not like opening up a Kumon education center or Mathnasium or some retail business that it's going to cap at 250, 300K. It's really hard to hit, keep going, or you have to do another big capital investment. Well, your guys' business model, from what I understand, kind of the sky is the limit. And yeah, you might buy another territory, or maybe you buy an adjacent franchisee out, and you grow as well, that way. But you don't have to keep reinvesting in capital expenditures and huge renovation projects. There's none of that, from what I understand.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. That kind of resonates with me personally as well, right? My folks have always been in brick and mortar retail businesses. And so for them, I always saw one of the limitations with what they did. And one of the reasons I decided to kind of go into service-based business was for that very reason, right? It's a lot more capital intensive as you have to build out, new stores or new restaurants, right? Versus with this, the sky is the limit, right? You are already starting out with a large territory. Our territory is almost one and a half, two times the size of the average territory of, say, like a Homestead or some of the more mature franchisors, right? And so that allows you to really, be able to do your business at scale. And as you mentioned, right, it's very capital efficient for you to grow, whether that's buying another territory or buying out another existing options franchise owner, right? And so, it really is a business where you can experience, exponential growth. And as you mentioned, right, our average franchise by the third year does $300,000 in EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings. And, that is the top 2% of earners in America, right? And so you're really looking at a business model where maybe if you're coming from another country to work hard for several years, really put in a lot of effort, stabilize the operations, and then you'll be cash flowing where you're, one of the top earners in this country. So, yeah, it's really, a great space to be in. It's a great business model. And as you said, it's really capital efficient for you to grow to achieve, your dreams.
Yeah, and the hard work's the key part, and we emphasize. And we've been at Visa franchise. My brother and I founded it 9 years ago. We've seen a lot of successes, and we've also seen failures. And a lot of times, those failures come about from people that aren't willing to put in and put in the hard work, whether it's 50, 60, some weeks 70 hours a week to get the job done. And I think in those critical 2 years, or even the 3 year period, it's all hands on deck to make sure that the ship's going, and you're
Mm-hmm.
growing.
Yeah.
And then you can take a step back. But if you want to be making 300K, it comes at a cost of time and serious commitment. But at the end of the day, from what I understand, and talking to franchisees, it's pretty fulfilling. It's not like you're selling hot dogs or hamburgers. You're really helping seniors, and at sometimes, at a very critical moment at the end of their life.
Absolutely. On that last note, a couple of things I wanted to mention there. One is, it really is a feel good business too,
Yeah.
right? It's probably one of the most satisfying, I would say, the franchise, at least the space, the senior care space franchise type businesses that are out there, right? This is a really kind of vulnerable time for families when they're needing, this type of care that we offer. And so, you get to not only hear the different, tragic stories and the different things that these families are dealing with. And sometimes you hear it directly from the care recipient who's calling care for themselves, right? And so when you're able to make a difference in that person's life, right, whether it's for short term or some of our cases, which is long term, it's really a feel good business. And, people are attracted to this space for that reason, right? Of course, our item 19 is strong, and you can make a couple 100,000, 300,000 a year. But more importantly than that, you're really making a difference, right, in your community, and you're able to do that, even at scale if you wish, right? It's kind of up to you. So I always like to tell all of our, franchisees, prospective candidates, that the other thing is as we're very transparent, right, Patrick? We talk about transparency. I mentioned transparency and integrity at the beginning of this call. One thing that I always tell all of our prospective candidates, right, and I say it during our first intro call, and I reiterate it during our FDD review call, even discovery day, all the way up until they're signing, which is that yes, the numbers are great, right? You'll be able to do really well. But at the end of the day, right, it really comes down to, it's a service based business, and you're going to get what you put into it,
Yeah.
right? And so if the mindset is hey, I can run this maybe semi absentee from the get go,
Wow.
or, I can just hope that, some of these lead gen companies will just send referrals my way. Or if I go to maybe the hospital once and, they'll just start sending me cases. I hate to break it to them, but that's not how our space works, right? It's a grind, it's a commitment, right? It's a commitment to putting yourself out there and really building, those referral sources, building those relationships with case managers, with nurses, with discharge planners, right? To be able to get those referrals. And the beautiful part about our business is once you do that consistently, right? For 1, 2, 3 years where you're showing up always, right? On maybe a weekly or monthly basis, you're showing up to all of the local hospitals or assisted living facilities or rehabilitation centers. They really get to know you. And that's when the fun part happens because you organically start getting cases sent your way, right? But yes, the first 3 years are certainly a grind, and you have to be willing to put in the work where you're willing to show up at, these different health systems and get rejected, but still show up again, right? And that's why I love working with immigrants because, us immigrants, we're not afraid for rejection, and, we're going to keep showing up no matter what. And that's that's half the battle. As long as you're willing to show up consistently, it's like any other business. The longer you stay in it, the more likely you are to succeed. And it truly applies to our business model.
Radhik, can you think of any concluding thoughts for those that are thinking about moving to the U.S. through the E-2 visa, especially maybe exploring an options for Senior America franchise?
Yeah, I think senior care, our space is a really strong one, over the next 10 to 20 years, right? And so, I think that one of the appeals of our franchise model, right, to a lot of prospective candidates, right, is that a lot of times people are coming as kind of a couple, right? You're coming to America as a husband and wife, and our business model is really good, as I was talking about earlier, where it really caters to some of the strengths that immigrants have, right? And typically, a husband and wife can make an exceptional team. And there's really like the two main roles where, if you do both of those things really well, you're almost guaranteed to success with our business model. And so I think from that perspective, it's really appealing to E-2 candidates, right? And the other thing that I'll mention is we have the experience of working with 6+ E-2 candidates at this point. And so we know really well what it goes into making sure that they can secure their E-2 visa. And we really hold the hand, in the beginning, whether it's filling out questionnaires for our candidates for their E-2 visas, or making sure we can put them in touch with the right consulting company to obtain their license, or whatever really it takes to make sure that, the transition for them to come to this country, securing the visa, and then more importantly, opening up their business. Because I truly understand, right? It's a big decision to leave your entire life in another country, come here and embark on this journey. And I really keep it more of like a family like culture, right? Where, I give my cell phone number and people message me on WhatsApp all the time, right? All of our E-2 candidates do. And, while I'm the CEO of the company, I encourage it because, I want them to know that I'm always there for them, right? And that's really important to me to make sure that they have the support.
A lot of the home care businesses, even the one you mentioned, are bought by big startups, private equity, publicly traded companies, and there's a big conflict of interest because the E-2 visa investor, is signing a 10-year agreement, and we hope that you're still around, 10 years from now. Where if it's private equity fund or different capital structure, it's probably not going to be a clear overlap. So that's something that we appreciate. I know our clients appreciate that you're a very active owner operator at the end of the day yourself.
Absolutely. And I actually mentioned this to a couple of candidates that given the recent acquisition, our company is completely privately held between my partner and I, right? And so as we're embarking on this journey as, new franchisors, it's really wonderful because we're going to get to grow alongside our new franchisees, right? So through their 10-year, entrepreneurial journey, as, they come to this country and they embark on the American dream, we'll be right there with them, right? As Patrick, you mentioned, maybe there may be an infusement of capital in the future or something along those lines, but we will be leading the ship, and continue to do so and grow organically next to our candidates. So we're super excited for that, and we definitely appreciate it.
Well, Radhik, really appreciate you having taken the time to speak with me and have our audience listen in. We'll be sure to include links to your website for those that can want to explore getting more information, as well as people can reach out directly to us at Visa Franchise. And together with Radhik, we're going to take care of the entire process for you, where Visa Franchise, opening the LLC, tax ID, business bank account, business plan, bring in the external immigration attorney, and then, as Radhik said, bringing in consultants if needed for the licensure, making sure you're comfortable with the opportunity, talking to existing franchisees for validation. So we're working together where the end goal is for you and your family, talking to E-2 visa investors to operate a prosperous business and allow your family a great opportunity in the States.
Absolutely. And one last thing I wanted to
Sure.
mention, Patrick, was, it's been a pleasure to work with Visa Franchise. We've had the privilege of working with you guys and partnering with you guys, for over a year now. And, I'm super excited about continuing to work with you guys and see where this partnership goes.
Thanks so much, Radhik. I
Thank you,
appreciate the
Patrick.
kind words.
Thank you.